Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live, and a happy Friday to you. If you're in the part of the world where it's still Friday, if you're on the other side of the date line, happy Saturday morning to you. Thanks so much for being here with us, wherever you are. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin, our guest both hours. It's Ask Me Anything, and now that I've said that, the phone lines will fill up. So go ahead and dial 888-318-7884. It's actually the first day of work for me this week, here, at least here. On Monday and Tuesday, we had the rosary and then funeral for my mother. And thank you to everybody who prayed for my mom and sent their, in many cases, very kind words. I very much appreciate that. And thanks to my colleagues for covering for me. And then after that, I went to Oklahoma City on a trip that had been planned for a long time. And so had a wonderful time in Oklahoma City, getting to do some talks there. And now back here for one day of studio work. One whole day this week. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. Teaching with Authority is one of his books. The Daily Defense is one of his books. The Fathers Know Best is one. The Bible is a Catholic book. That's just dipping your toe into the Jimmy Akin world. You can also find his podcast, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, wherever you get your podcasts, and his other podcasts, the Jimmy Akin podcast, also available wherever you get your podcasts. Jimmy Akin, hello.
Hello, Cy Kellett. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm having a tough one-day work week this week, but holding up okay.
You worked when you were in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But it's nice to go out and see the world a little bit. It's nice to go out and see the world sometimes. 888-318-7884, the number, 888-31-TRUTH. You can ask Jimmy whatever you like, and I always like to ask him, what dropped today on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World?
Well, today on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, it's episode number 365, and the only way I could think to commemorate that was by talking about the mystery of the year. And by that, I don't mean the most whatever mystery we cover during the year, but the mystery of the year itself. How long humans have been aware of it, how we've kept time during it, where months come from, how we got the months we have now. And so we talk all about the year and how it's reckoned in different systems.
Oh, that's fun. I'm going to listen to that. I sometimes have wondered, like, when did people notice that it's a cycle, that it's not just stuff happens and then some other stuff happens and then some other stuff, but go, hey, we keep going around the same thing over and over again. Cold on one end, hot on the other end. When did people do, like, maybe I'll watch the episode. I'll
cover that in the episode.
All right. 888-318-7884, the number. Nick is in New Jersey. Nick's going to start us off. Nick, go ahead. Ask your question, Jimmy Akin.
Sure. I'm going to try to make this very simple here. So let's say the new Pope, Pope Leo XIV, is in a meeting with the Society of St. Pius X. They're trying to negotiate some type of reconciliation. And the Society of St. Pius X says we still have a problem with Dignitatis Humanae, the Decree on Religious Liberty of Vatican II. Could the Pope say, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go in and I'm going to modify and change certain passages or certain words in Dignitatis Humanae to make them acceptable to you guys. Can he do that?
Well, that's not how they'd handle this kind of situation. The Pope would not go back and rewrite the text of a document that had been issued by Vatican II and approved by his predecessor, Paul VI. What could happen is that, so there's a couple of things. Popes have different abilities to modify previous teaching, and their ability is affected by whether the teaching has been articulated infallibly or whether it's been articulated non-infallibly. And we refer to this process of modification of teaching over time as doctrinal development. That's the term that's been used ever since St. John Henry Newman gave it that name. So if a teaching is non-infallible, then it is, to use a classical term, it's revisable. It can be modified. And so if an ecumenical council needed modification in one of its teachings, the Pope would simply announce the new teaching. He wouldn't go back and rewrite historical documents. Instead, he'd just say, here's the church's understanding of this teaching now. If a teaching has been articulated infallibly, whether by an ecumenical council or not, then the Pope cannot modify it because it's infallible or irreformable, to use the classical term. And what he can do in that case is not modify the teaching itself, but supplement the teaching. Because when teachings are infallibly defined, they're always very narrowly framed. And so they don't specify everything in the context that's related to the question. They just infallibly define this one single point. And so the Pope could go and add additional points around what had been defined to flesh it out a bit. And now in the case of Vatican II, none of the Vatican II documents articulated any new teachings in an infallible way. They did refer to teachings that had already been infallibly declared, like, for example, the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. But they didn't issue any new teachings. Therefore, anything that was new that the council articulated on religious liberty is non-infallible and therefore at least hypothetically open to revision.
Okay, very good. So basically, he wouldn't do it. Is that what we're saying? Because I mean, what if he tried to? What if he said, "I'm changing these words. I'm just doing it," even though it's never been done before?
He would essentially create a new document that had the new wording in it, but it wouldn't change the fact that Vatican II wrote a document that had different wording in it, and people would know that the historical original Vatican II document said something different. The situation would kind of be like taking a Vatican II document and treating it like the Code of Canon Law. The Code of Canon Law is a set of laws that the church has, and it can periodically be modified where they go into the Code of Canon Law itself and change the words. What the scenario you're proposing be done would be basically like that, treating this council document as if it was a legal document that could be modified. But that's not how the Pope would do it in practice. The same goal could be achieved of, I'm going to do things that will make whatever the question is acceptable to the SSPX. He could do that. He just wouldn't do it by rewriting the document. He'd just say, here's what the church understands now, and here's the level of authority that this previous statement has.
Nick, thanks. That brings us to our first break. Our guest is Jimmy Akin. Ask Me Anything this hour and next on Catholic Answers Live, 888-318-7884.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Are you looking to study Catholic theology in a formal way with the guidance of faithful scholars? Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by the Augustine Institute, offering master's degrees in theology, pastoral theology, and Catholic education with flexible study options on campus, online, or both. The Augustine Institute equips students to serve Christ and His Church in schools, parishes, dioceses, apostolates, and the home. Learn more today at augustine.edu.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Check out EWTN's official YouTube channel. Just follow the link on our homepage at EWTN.com or go to YouTube.com/EWTN.
Watch EWTN's live shows or today's homily from the Daily Mass.
Click the upload button to see our most recent clips.
You can also find all of EWTN YouTube content by clicking the playlist button.
It's all on the official EWTN YouTube channel at youtube.com/EWTN. Visit today.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. There's a big sale going on over at shop.catholic.com. Everything's on sale over there. You can get a whole bunch of great deals for, I don't know, Father's Day coming up, confirmations, graduations, First Communions. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Check it all out over at shop.catholic.com. That includes all the books we've got there from our guest, Jimmy Akin. This hour and next, it's Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin. And now we head to West Bend, Wisconsin, where Tyler is watching on YouTube. Welcome, Tyler. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question is about the Deuterocanon, and one objection that we get to it from Protestants is that the Jewish people didn't accept the 7 books. So my question is there any Jewish denominations early in history that accepted these 7 books?
Well, Judaism didn't have well-defined denominations. They had certain movements within Judaism. They were sometimes called schools, kind of like schools of philosophy, which doesn't mean they have a formal membership list or anything like that. I mean, some of them might, but this is not the typical phenomenon. And they did not all agree on the canon of Scripture. In the case of the Sadducees and the Samaritans, they accepted only the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis through Deuteronomy, as Scripture. The Pharisees had a broader canon that, at least in its final form, is basically the same as a Protestant Old Testament, which is because that's where the Protestants got their Old Testament. They took it from the descendants of the Pharisees, who were known as rabbinic Jews. But this canon was not in its final form until several centuries after the time of Jesus. There was still debate about whether some books that are included in it now should be in there or not. Some people said, like, hey, this version of Esther doesn't even mention God. Why should we consider this Scripture? There also was debate about some of the books that are now considered deuterocanonical being in there. One of them was Sirach, and there were rabbis who advocated Sirach being treated as Scripture. And that persisted until, say the AD 300s, about the same time that the Christian canon started to come clearly into focus. Then there was another group known as the Essenes who clearly accepted more than the Pharisees. It appears that they accepted all or most of the Deuterocanonicals, as well as certain additional works that are not typically found in either Jewish or Christian Bibles today, like the Book of Jubilees and the Book of First Enoch and a few things like that. Then there's a broader group of Jews who weren't really a single school, but they were living in the Jewish diaspora, and they'd been scattered among the nations, and they gave us what's known as the Septuagint translation of the Old Testament into Greek, and it includes the Deuterocanonicals. So we do have evidence for Jews of a number of different schools either being open to at least some of the Deuterocanonicals, and that applied to even the Pharisees with the example of Sirach that I mentioned, or accepting the Deuterocanonicals like the Essenes and the users of the Septuagint tradition. If you'd like to learn more about that, I talk about it in my book, The Bible is a Catholic Book. And since Tyler is here in the United States, why don't we see if we can send him a copy?
Tyler, I'll tell you what, you just hang on. All you got to do is give us a name. Edgar will take your name and give us an address, and we will send the book off to you. Tyler, thank you very much. All the lines full. On we go. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Aurora is in Charlotte, North Carolina, watching on YouTube. Welcome, Aurora. Hello. Hi.
So my question was, why did God make us like he did? Like, he didn't make us walk on all 4 paws.
Mm-hmm.
He made us walk on two legs?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, in that case, it's from a theological point of view, it's relatively easy to propose, and this is not church teaching, but it's relatively easy to propose an answer. By us walking on two legs, it freed up our hands so that we can manipulate objects with our hands. And being able to manipulate objects opens up a whole bunch of possibilities in how you interact with the world. So like dogs, you know, they do walk on four legs, they're quadrupeds, and they cannot do nearly as much in terms of interacting with the world as we can. You know, a dog, for example, cannot open a door by grabbing the doorknob and turning it and pulling it. They can't cut food with knives and forks. They can use their mouth to do a few things we do with our hands, like carry stuff. But even their mouth has limitations. They can only carry something that'll fit in their mouth, whereas humans can carry bigger objects that you need both hands to move. So God gave us greater motor ability, greater ability to manipulate our environment. And that has a correlate in that it's something that goes along with that, in other words, which is because we have greater ability to interact with the world, we also have greater intelligence that goes along with the greater ability to interact with the world. And you can see this in other creatures that have similar fine motor abilities, like chimpanzees and gorillas. They have higher intelligence than most quadrupeds. Not necessarily all quadrupeds, like elephants, have high intelligence, but then elephants also have trunks, which they can use as manipulators. Elephants use their trunks the way we use our hands. Similarly, you look in the aquatic realm, and there are octopi, or octopuses is actually the standard English pluralization of that. They've got 8 arms with suckers on them, and they use those to manipulate the world, kind of like we use our hands, and they also have higher intelligence. So there seems to be a correlation between how finely you can interact with things in the world and intelligence. And God wanted us to be the most intelligent creatures on the planet, and so he gave us the ability to interact with the world in a very detailed, systematic way using our hands. And the easiest way to get us there was by kicking us up on our hind legs so that our hands became free.
What do you think of that, Aurora?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have a follow-up, or you're satisfied with that?
I think he's satisfied with that.
Very good. Very good. Thank you for using your two hands to dial the phone. It was nice talking with you, Aurora. You wouldn't have been able to do that.
These days would be voice control.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Now even the dogs. Yeah.
Hey Siri, call Catholic Answers Live, whatever.
My dog changes the channel when I'm watching TV. If I put it down next to me on the couch, he will. I don't know what he thinks he's doing, but he's not the most intelligent creature on the planet. Aurora, thank you very, very much. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's Ask Me Anything. We'll go to Nebraska now. Dan is watching on Facebook in Nebraska. Glad to have you, Dan. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you so much, Cy and Jimmy, for your ministry and for taking my call today. What I'm wondering is, if you had 3 lifelong Catholics who are all engaged in sin of a grave matter with deliberate consent, let's say one was involved in fornication, one in homosexual behavior, and the other using birth control, and they all had full knowledge only to the extent that they know what the Catholic Church teaches, but they've been convinced for years, and let's say they remain convinced until they die, that what they're doing is not sinful. Because in the first 2 examples, let's say they're convinced they love one another, it's a monogamous relationship, but for this example, they're all 3 absolutely convinced it's not a sin, so they never confess it, they never repent of what the Catholic Church would call mortal sin. Are all 3 of them engaged then in what we might call objective mortal sin and outside of a state of grace until the time would come where they might repent, and if they don't, then they remain in that, they remain outside of that state of grace?
Okay, so there's several things to pull apart there. The first thing is the definition of mortal sin involves 3 elements. It involves grave matter, it involves adequate knowledge, and deliberate consent. And sometimes you'll hear people say full knowledge, but I think adequate is a little bit better there. Now, you specified that these people have grave matter, and you named 3 examples where that can be present. And you also said they have knowledge of what the Catholic Church teaches. You didn't mention, do they give these actions deliberate consent? Because there are things like psychological compulsions that can deprive someone of deliberate consent. And your answer really didn't cover that, but you need all 3 of those conditions to be met for a mortal sin to occur. If only grave matter is met, then I would say the church doesn't use the term mortal sin for that, but I can buy the idea that you could call it a objective mortal sin, even though the person, I mean, that's a little bit problematic, but I would know what you mean. But to have true mortal sin that will deprive one of the state of grace, all 3 conditions have to be met. Now, you mentioned 3 examples that can involve grave matter, and we'll just assume for purposes of argument that in the 3 cases, the individuals have deliberate consent to these acts. They're not under a psychological compulsion or something like that. And so that'll focus our attention on the amount of knowledge they have. Merely having heard that the Catholic Church teaches something does not mean that the person has the kind of knowledge needed in order to be fully responsible. You need to believe that the Catholic Church has the authority to teach you on this. And if you don't believe that, if you have maybe the idea of, well, the church can teach on some stuff, but it's not important that I take this seriously or something, well, then you don't have the kind of knowledge that you need. Would be parallel to the case of someone who hears the gospel preached by a crazy man. So if you're a psychedelic, let's suppose you're a tribesman on an island and a Christian missionary comes, but he's wrong in the head, and he tells you that, that the sun is freezing cold, and that pigs live in trees, and Jesus is the Messiah. Well, okay, he told you the gospel, but he told it to you in a context that imposed no obligation on you to believe it. So you wouldn't be damned for rejecting the gospel in that case. And it would be the same here. If someone has been told that, oh yeah, the Catholic Church says that's sin, but it's not made clear to them that they really they're not convinced that they need to believe what the Catholic Church says about this sin, then they could dismiss it, and it would be the same as hearing the gospel but not being given any reason to believe it. You need to both be told the truth and understand the reasons that, oh yeah, this is serious, I need to believe this, in order to have an obligation to believe it. And that applies as much to this is a sin as it does to this is the gospel. Now, there is an inbuilt knowledge of sin that is in the human heart that God put there, but not everybody is. Not everyone's consciences work the way that they should. And so just because there's an inbuilt knowledge of some things are sinful doesn't mean that this specific person has a clear awareness. Furthermore, there are complicating factors and the Catechism goes into all this, but there are complicating factors like someone can have heard that something's a sin and even know that they need to take that seriously, and yet they reject it and say, oh, I don't believe that. Well, in that case, they are responsible for their rejection of this truth, and thus they would be fulfilling the knowledge needed to have a mortal sin. But someone else in a different situation even though they've heard that it's a sin, they may not have the knowledge needed. So it's really on a case-by-case basis. But the church only uses the term mortal sin for when all three conditions are definitely fulfilled. And in terms of the knowledge condition, it'll be fulfilled in some people who reject the teaching, but not in other people who reject the teaching.
Dan, I really hope that was helpful to you. Thank you very much for the call. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin this hour and next, which is always a fun way to spend a Friday. But I'll tell you what, 3 of our 6 lines are open. That rarely happens. So this is a good time to dial if you've got questions for Jimmy Akin. 888-318-7884. Anybody's welcome to call. You don't have to be a Catholic, certainly. Anybody can call. Whatever question you've got is welcome as well. 888-318-7884. We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Deepen your connection to the Church's holy days and seasons while you draw on the wisdom of the Church Fathers. Feasts of Our Fathers, the new book from Mike Aquilina and Adam Lucas, is a treasury of history, prayers, insights, and lessons that will bring you closer to the earliest of Catholic traditions. Take your prayer life and your solidarity with the Church, past and present, to a new level. Order your copy of Feasts of Our Fathers today at shop.catholic.com.
When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore. There's another thing you get on Friday, a little bit of groovy music each Friday. Comes with Jimmy Akin and Ask Me Anything. And you're welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. David in Salem, Indiana, had to drop or wasn't able to stay on the line, Jimmy. But the question is timely, so I wanted to throw it out to you. Where do popes get their names from?
Well, they pick them. This is actually the very first decision a pope makes after he becomes pope. The first decision is do you accept your election? And if he says yes, and he's already a bishop, bam, that moment he's the pope. So once he's become pope, the very next thing that happens is they ask him, by what name do you wish to be called? So this is his first decision as pope. And then, it gets announced, and then he comes out and so forth and greets the folks. So that's where the names come from if you interpret the question in one sense. But there are a couple of other senses that you could ask it in. One of them is, well, what's the source of the names? If the Pope himself picks it, where is he getting it from? And the answer is, these days, popes get their name typically from previous popes. And so they look back on who were the previous popes, who's someone that I would like to emulate, what message will be sent if I pick this pope's name rather than that pope's name, and they pick it from a previous pope. but not always. Now, originally, popes didn't have a papal name. You could argue Peter did because Jesus changed his name, so he got his name from Jesus. His birth name was Simeon or Simon. But then Jesus called him Peter, and that's what other people called him. But then after Peter, they just kept their birth name. So like Pope Clement, he would have just been born Clement. And, Pope Linus, he would have just been born Linus. And so they took their name from whatever their parents had given them. Now, there were a few deviations from this in the first millennium. So that's between, that's the first 10 centuries up to the year 1000. There were a few. The first guy to pick a different papal name was named Mercurius. That was his birth name. But he didn't, it's reported, at least, I haven't seen a direct quote from him on this, but it's reported that he didn't feel it would be appropriate for the Christian world to be led by someone named Mercurius, because Mercury was the name of a Roman god. And so it's like, why is your Christian leader named after a pagan god? So he thought there was a problem with that. But not all popes have thought that, because there was a previous Pope Dionysius, and Dionysius was also a pagan god. So there have been popes with pagan god names. But Mercurius thought that was a bad idea, so he took the regnal name or papal name John. And he was the second person to have the name John, so he became known as Pope John II. There were a handful of others in the first 1,000 years of church history that did the same thing. But when the papal name custom really took hold was in the second millennium. Just before the year 1000, in 996, we had a gentleman take a special name as Pope, and thereafter, almost everybody did. I mean, basically for 1,000 years, you had people picking a new name when they became Pope, with like 3 exceptions in the 1500s that kept their birth names. But you might wonder, well, why would this happen at this point in time? Why would popes all of a sudden start this tradition of taking a different name? I have never seen a study done on that, a historical study done on that question, but my guess is it's because of what royalty were doing. It's been common with royalty throughout history to pick a different regnal name than their birth name. And so by the Middle Ages, when the year 1000 happened, kings and queens were a big deal in Europe. And the Pope was also a monarch. He ruled the papal states. And so and it seemed more like a person was more authoritative if they had a new name in their new office as Pope. And so it brought dignity to the office in that cultural context. And so I suspect that the naming conventions among European monarchs had an influence on popes taking new names. If that hypothesis is true, then we might expect that sometime in the third millennium, that custom may fall away, because kings and queens are not a big deal now. The Pope does not have the papal states anymore, and rather than trying to acquire more influence by imitating what secular rulers are doing, the popes are trying to come across as humble and as the servant of the servants of God. So at some point in the third millennium, maybe 100 years from now, we may have popes just sticking with their baptismal names, unless their baptismal name is Peter or Jesus, because we're not going to have a Pope Peter II. No one wants to. Someone who had a birth name of Peter, they would definitely pick something else, because otherwise it would be like, who are you to compare yourself to Saint Peter? So I don't expect a Peter II. Also, if someone's named Jesus, Pope Jesus, really, that would be a bit of a shock to some people. And so I suspect anyone named Jesus or Peter will keep up the custom of changing names, but the custom may fade away. And we even see signs that we're living in an age right now where popes are reconsidering the pool of names they want to draw from. because in 1978 we had John Paul I elected, and he had the first double papal name in history. He said he wanted to honor Pope John and Pope Paul, so he called himself John Paul. Then we had Pope Francis, which was another unprecedented papal name after St. Francis of Assisi. And even if we look at other popes like Pope John the 23rd and Paul VI, they had reached back hundreds of years to find a papal name. And so that suggests that popes these days are feeling like maybe the current route bunch of names is a little stale and they're rethinking some things. But I did a whole study of the subject of papal names back in 2013 when Pope Benedict retired. I turned it into an ebook just called Pope Names. It's not currently on Amazon, but I'm hoping I can get it up again real quickly. And I also talk about this in the upcoming Monday episode of the Jimmy Akin podcast, where I look at how four popes, the four most recent popes, so that's John Paul II, Benedict XVI, Francis, and Leo XIV, how they met the world. And I cover their choice of papal names, because that's their first decision about how they're going to interact with the world. And then we watch footage of them coming out on the balcony, the loggia at St. Peter's, and we analyze their body language and see what that tells us about how they're going to reign. So there are some very interesting lessons you can learn about them from just their opening interactions before they say anything in public. Just studying, okay, what's their name and what are they doing with their body? That tells us a bunch about their reigns. And I'm going to be covering that on the Jimmy Akin podcast on Monday.
Very cool. David, I'm sorry you weren't able to stay on the line, but I hope you were listening and that answer was helpful to you. Jesus is in Washington watching on YouTube. Welcome. You got a question for Jimmy Akin?
I have one for Jesus. Jesus, if you're ever elected Pope, what name will you pick?
I would have to say Leo.
Leo, okay.
Very good. Because you like Leo so far?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was originally I thought it was gonna be the Filipino guy.
Cardinal
Tagle. I was just like, I'm assuming that since he was very similar to Pope Francis.
Yeah.
And I was surprised he was Leo, and I was like, wait, what? I never heard of this guy. But recently I started looking more into him, and yes, I do like him.
I think the wait, who is this guy, was the general reaction. I think the people who knew for sure were the exception.
People that really had that reaction back in 1978 at the Second Conclave, because we had Italian popes for hundreds of years, and then all of a sudden, who's this Polish guy?
Yeah. Jesus, go ahead with your question.
So my question was, why did God create hell?
Well, I think that the question presupposes an idea of hell as if it's something that God positively created. And this is understandable because we see imagery in traditional Christian art and so forth of like a fiery place with demons and damned souls. Like it's a special place that's envisioned as if it's a physical place. But we need to be careful because the imagery that Scripture uses and much less later Christian art uses is not really something that we should put a lot of literal weight on, because the afterlife is different than what we have in this life. If hell was just a physical place here in this universe, we'd be able to find it. Some people have envisioned hell as like being down inside the earth, for example, in Christian art. The Bible didn't do that, but Christian art does. And if that were the case, we would have found it with all the seismic scans we've done of the interior of the earth. I would say that our imaginations are not set up in this life to fully process what the afterlife is like. And so the imagery that we find in Scripture that depicts the afterlife is just meant to give us a sense of what it's like. And the key two things that the imagery that Scripture uses for hell conveys to us, I would say, three things. The first one, well, two things. The first one is that it involves some kind of separation from God. And this is like in the parables where, the king says, kick this person out into outer darkness. And then the second thing is there's going to be like suffering there of some kind, which is like the follow-up to when kick this person into outer darkness, where there's going to be weeping and gnashing of teeth, suggesting that these people in outer darkness are not happy. And so I think if you look across the imagery that we find in Scripture and you think about it on that level, the two things that leap out are it involves separation from God, and it's not going to be fun. But you can even link those two things because God is the source of joy and happiness. So if you're separated from the source of joy and happiness, of course you're going to be unhappy. And so I think that the fundamental thing about hell is that it's separation from God. And in that case, it's not a thing that was created. Instead, it's something that people chose for themselves. They chose to turn away from God and be separate from him, and God simply honors their choice. Now, where their bodies are, their resurrected bodies, in space, I would say we don't know. But that's not, even if there is a special place that their bodies are located, that's incidental. The real essence of hell is separation from God, where you're excluded from the joy of his presence. And that's something these people chose for themselves, and God is simply honoring their choice. So I wouldn't view hell as something that God created as much as it is something people chose. And if you want to use the language of creation, I would say people create their own hells by choosing to separate themselves from God in different ways. If someone chooses to separate themselves from God by committing adultery, they're going to have one type of hell. If they choose to separate themselves from God by committing murder, they're going to have another type of hell. But it's really based on what about God are you rejecting, and you kind of create your own hell.
Jesus, that all makes sense to you?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the call. We'll take a quick break. Right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul? And that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
This is Jim Pinto, Director of EWTN Media Missionaries. Mother Angelica said, "The essence of evangelization is to tell everybody Jesus loves you." You can help EWTN share the good news by becoming a media missionary. Visit EWTNmissionaries.com today and join us in sharing the eternal word with the world.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's Ask Me Anything. Jimmy Akin is our guest. And you are welcome to call with your questions, 888-318-7884. Heading up to North Dakota now, Dickinson, North Dakota, where Benjamin is listening on 101.9 FM. Glad you're here, Benjamin. Go ahead with your question.
Hello, Jimmy. Hope you're having a good day. My question is, why is knowing church history important to Christianity?
Because there's a lot to learn from church history. There are, as they say, he who is ignorant of the past is doomed to repeat it. And there have been notable ups and downs in church history. If you want to maximize goodness, you need to know about, well, how did they get to the ups? Like, what techniques did they use to evangelize people? How did they spread the gospel? If you want to know how to avoid the downs, how to avoid the bad things in church history, you need to know about the bad things. Also, we as Christians do exist, and so that's reason number one. Reason number two is we do exist in continuity with the church going all the way back to the first century. And it's important to recognize that fact and to know something about that. And then thirdly, there have been a lot of accomplishments in church history that deserve credit, where we need, for example, saints have accomplished great things, and we need to know about them. They're our brothers in Christ, and so we want to know about them and their accomplishments, and that serves as an inspiration to us to do better as well. So there's three reasons why it's important to know about something about church history. That's not to say everyone needs to be a church historian. They don't. But it is important to know something and have some sense of historical appreciation of the church.
What do you think?
Thank you, Jimmy.
Benjamin, I have this feeling that you have a paper due on this. Is that correct? Or
I know. I was about to ask, is this a homework question?
Well, it's part of our semester project.
Very good. All right.
Yeah, shout out to Sister Lily Rose.
So what's sister's name?
Lily Rose.
Lily Rose. Okay. I'll tell you what. Maybe it'll help you with your project. I'd like to send you a copy of Jimmy's book, A Daily Defense, 365 Days plus one to becoming a better apologist. Hang on for that, Benjamin. All you got to do is give us an address and we'll send it off to you. Jimmy, you had the same feeling I had. Something about the way he asked it sounded like...
There are certain questions it feels like someone's asking me to do their homework.
Well, he fessed up to it. Let's go to Edward in San Antonio, Texas, listening on the great Guadalupe Radio Network. We're glad you're here. Edward, go ahead with your question.
Okay, it might be a follow-up question to the gentleman with the three-person scenario, and also the question you just took from Benjamin. Basically, it goes, taking vows when we make our sacraments, I pledge to love God, building my relationship with Him, right? And when I choose to not inform myself of God's commandments so that I can avoid accountability, is that a sin, or am I okay because I'm unaware of the depths of my actions, and I'm concerned on how I can explain this to others in a compassionate way also?
Okay, so I alluded to part of this in the previous answer, but I can discuss it more fully now. I mentioned that and the Catechism talks about this, so I would recommend that you go read the section in the Catechism about this. But it's in the section on mortal sin. While ignorance can excuse from moral obligation, it doesn't always. There's also what's known as crass, supine, or affected ignorance. And that actually, any of those forms actually increases responsibility. So if someone has the suspicion that, I think the action X might be sinful, but I don't want to know that it's sinful because then I'd have to stop it. So I'm not going to look into that. That is a form of ignorance, where deliberately shielding yourself from knowledge so that you won't have to change your behavior, that does not decrease but increases culpability, or at least it doesn't neutralize culpability. So if you say, well, I don't want to look into whether this is a sin because I'd have to change my behavior, that's something that if you have significant suspicion that you would have to change your behavior and you just won't look into it for that reason, that kind of ignorance is not going to protect you from moral responsibility. In terms of how to explain this compassionately with others, well, there's no general advice about that. One might want to simply say, here's a passage in the catechism that discusses this. On the other hand, if it's someone that you have a good relationship with, you may be able to talk them through it, but you may not. These all involve judgment calls, and how to discuss this narrowly focused issue with someone is going to really depend on who you're talking to and what their relationship is and what their degree of openness is.
Yes.
That made sense to you, Edward?
Oh, it 1,000%. I really appreciate your insight on this.
Well, Edward,
sure thing.
Thank you for the call and for the question. Let's go to Igor down in Florida, watching on YouTube. Igor, welcome. You got a question for Jimmy?
Yes. Hi, Sai. Hi, Jimmy.
Hi.
Thanks for taking my call. I was recently talking with a friend from Brazil, and he told me that when he started his marriage process, he was informed by his parish that he was actually not baptized, because the priest who baptized him 30 years ago committed like a heinous crime, like slaughtered someone or something. And apparently for that reason, all his baptisms, or maybe all his sacraments that he performed, I don't know, were annulled somehow. That sounds strange to me. So I'm hoping you can clarify that for me.
Okay, well, so the church doesn't usually use the term annulment in this case, but an annulment is simply a finding that something wasn't done right in such a way that it didn't have its effect. So there are ways you can do something that looks like baptism, but it's going to be invalid and it's not going to have its effect. And if given that that's possible, like let's take a look, for example, at the Jehovah's Witnesses. They pour water on people and they call it baptism, but they don't use any words. So they don't say, for example, in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit. They don't use any words at all. And so this is not a valid baptism because it's missing one of the essential elements of baptism, which is the words. That they're also called the form of baptism, whereas the water is the matter of baptism. So this is missing one of the essential elements, and thus it may look kind of like baptism, and they may call it baptism, but it's not really baptism. And if a priest systematically failed to perform proper baptisms, then you'd want to let people know, because they need to get baptized, especially if they want to receive the other sacraments, like go to confession and receive the Eucharist or get married, because baptism is the gateway to the other sacraments. You need to have baptism before you can have any of the others. So fortunately, it is rare that anybody has an invalid baptism in this situation where a priest just systematically did something wrong in all of his baptisms. It is rare, but it does happen periodically, because humans are fallible, and some of them do terrible things even as priests. Now, if you mentioned he did something terrible, you thought it might be killing someone, that would not invalidate his baptisms. That's just a sin that he committed. If he killed someone, then that's bad, but it's not going to invalidate baptisms, because anybody can baptize. If you've got two prisoners on death row, let's say they're both murderers, well, the church's understanding is one murderer could baptize the other murderer. You don't even have to be a priest or a Christian to baptize someone, as long as you use the form and the matter and have the intent of, I'm doing the Christian baptism here, then it'll work. So you can have murderers baptizing other people. But so I don't know what it was this priest did, but it wouldn't have been that. That would not invalidate baptisms. It must have been some other systematic mistake he was making in performing the ceremonies.
Igor, I do hope that was helpful to you. You can hear the music, and we have to take our break. We will be right back after just a couple minutes. We'll continue with Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin. There's just one line open, but another line might open up during the break. You never know. Give it a try. 318-7884. Jimmy's happy to talk with anybody about anything, basically. That's what it comes down to. So if you've got a question and you'd like to ask, you should feel welcome to call. 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's Friday. Jimmy Akin's here. We've already had a little groovy music, probably some groovy music yet to come. But what we're here to do is answer questions. And if you've got one, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. What can you ask about? Well, have you ever heard of the topic called anything? That's right. It's Ask Me Anything this hour. Ask whatever you like of our guest, Jimmy Akin, the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World and the Jimmy Akin Podcasts, and guest on about a million other podcasts, including this one. You can call and ask whatever you like, 888-318-7884. And Jimmy is back and ready to go. And every single line is lit, Jimmy.
Okay.
All right, back to work we go then. Davis is in New England, listening on Catholic.com. Usually people give the name of a specific state, but you're just in the general area of New England, huh, Davis?
Yeah, like the wrestlers say, from parts unknown.
Okay.
So anyway,
That's not necessarily particularly helpful to me because my friends now, my knowledge of geography gets fuzzy once you're above the Mason-Dixon line. And I would identify places as part of New England that my friends from up north tell me are not. Like, for example, New Jersey.
Oh,
okay,
no.
So it's got new in the name, and Jersey is
right.
British Island.
Right.
So I want to think of New Jersey. Of course, it's New England. It's right there in the name. But no, they tell me New Jersey is not New England.
It is, in fact, not.
Yeah, so my
Oh, sorry. Davis wants to get to his question. Go ahead, Davis. Usually we're trying to move the person to the question.
I know. It's like for once, we're the ones who are delaying getting the question.
All right, Davis, go ahead.
So when I was in college, I started to be interested in history, and I read the Will and Ariel Durant Story of Civilization series, which I think is 11 volumes, and it really enlivened my interest in history. But I guess it's, according to professional history, it's kind of hit or miss.
It's also dated.
So I'm wondering if Jimmy said, if you were going to start your study of history again, is there a series of books that you would recommend or an approach?
Well, unfortunately, you've already eliminated the first one that comes to my mind, which is the Will Durant series, The Story of Civilization. There are shorter works that are more recent and that are going to... and what Will and Ariel Durant did was a monumental accomplishment, but nobody can be an expert in everything in world history. And they also wrote decades ago. So we have, there's been a lot more historical research done since then. I'm not closely familiar with anything else of a general survey nature of world history. I mean, I think I've got a couple of books in like audiobook format about world history that are much shorter than the Durant series and more recent, but I don't tend to study world history as a whole. What I tend to do is study particular aspects of world history. So, and frequently primary sources. So like if I want to know about, Roman history, I'll go read Tacitus and Suetonius and Dio Cassius. These were Roman historians. Or if I want to know, about the ancient world in general, I might read Herodotus, the father of history. Or I may read a book on Egyptology, or I may read a book on prehistory. The origins of the human race, or I may read a book on the American Civil War, or any number of different things. But I'm afraid I don't have a curated list for you of here are some series that survey the whole of world history. So I guess my best advice would be to just go on Amazon and type in world history and see what comes up. And then maybe after you have a basic kind of overview of world history, digging down into particular periods of world history, either using secondary sources or even better, primary sources.
Okay, Davis?
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you for the call. All right, let's go to Donald in Plainsboro, New Jersey, which is not a part of New England. We have
established that.
We just established. Listening on Domestic Church Radio. Glad to have you here, Donald. Go ahead with your question.
And as a reminder, New Jersey used to be in the Dominion of New England.
Oh, it did?
Yes.
There's a twist to this story then, Donald. Thank you very much. I will be looking that up. Go ahead with your question.
And New York was once New Amsterdam.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess I'll ask my question. I was wondering when Jesus first knew that Judas Iscariot would betray him.
Well, we don't know the answer because we're not told. We do know that he knew it before the Last Supper, or at least before the Last Supper in a couple of ways. One of the ways is at the Last Supper he predicts Judas's betrayal. But we also know that he definitely knew it before then, because in John's Gospel, at least this is what we're presented, at one point before the Last Supper, Jesus tells the disciples, tells the 12, have I not chosen you, and yet one of you is a devil? And he's referring, of course, to Judas. So that could mean that he knew Judas would be in his divine intellect. God knows everything because he's omniscient. And so in his divine intellect, Jesus always knew that Judas would betray him. But in terms of his human intellect, which is finite by its nature because it's human, when did knowledge of Judas's betrayal enter Jesus's human intellect? Well, it's possible that he knew it before he even chose Judas. And that could be suggested by his reference to choosing them, even though one of them is a devil. Having said that, you could read that another way. You could say, I chose you guys, and at that time, he didn't know Judas would betray him, but he later realized Judas would. I mean, just based on the language used, I can't exclude that meaning. According to the church's understanding, and this is in the section on Christ's human knowledge in the Catechism, Jesus knew everything that pertained to his mission that he had come to reveal. And since his dying on the cross was something that pertained to his mission, I think based on that, you can make an argument that he would have known that Judas would betray him from the beginning. I can visualize ways to argue against that, but I would say the specific moment, if there ever was a specific moment where this came into his awareness, is something we're simply not told the answer to. We know he knew about Judas's betrayal before the betrayal, but exactly how far before is something we're not directly told, and so that's a matter of opinion. Some people could say, oh, he knew it all the way through his life, or at least he knew it, from the beginning of his ministry, or he knew it at some point in his ministry. But I think that's something on which Catholic theologians could have differences of opinion.
Donald, thank you for a very interesting question. I appreciate that. We got to take our first break. Right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
EWTN Radio Essentials is now EWTN Radio Extra. It's the past, present, and future of Catholic radio. You'll hear classic programs from Mother Angelica and Dr. Scott Hahn, plus timeless devotionals and award-winning podcasts from our partners on EWTN's Podcast Central. Listen now to EWTN Radio Extra on the EWTN app, on smart speakers, and on EWTN.com.
back. Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. It's Ask Me Anything. Everything's on sale over at shop.catholic.com. Check it out. It's called the store-wide sale because everything's on sale, and it's well-timed for Father's Day and confirmations and graduations and the like. A huge selection, including lots of Jimmy Akin materials, the popular books we talk about, like the Bible is a Catholic book and a daily defense and all the others, all on sale at shop.catholic.com. Off we go next to Colorado. Uriel in Colorado is on the line. Welcome. You got a question for Jimmy?
Oh, hi. Hello, Jimmy. Yes. So my question, if I have already confessed my sins to the Father, do I have to confess those same sins again? Well, to be more specifically, in my situation, I have found myself reflecting on my past actions, and I have repented for the things I've done, but the memory of those actions pains me. And, well, so my question would be, do I have to confess the same sins more than once?
So when you say you've confessed your sins to the Father, have you also gone to sacramental confession?
Yes.
Okay. Once you have confessed a sin in sacramental confession and been absolved, you do not need to confess it again. If the memory of it still causes you distress, reconfessing it is not the answer to that. And let me ask you another follow-up question. Have you ever been told, maybe by a priest or someone else, or just from your own reading, do you show any signs of scrupulosity?
I'm not sure what that means. Could you explain that?
Okay. So scrupulosity is a condition where people have an unhealthy perception of what is and is not sinful. They may worry, for example, this is an extreme example, but there are people who have this. It's also related to another psychological condition called obsessive compulsive disorder, where people have recurrent obsessive thoughts that are unpleasant that they can't get rid of. And many scrupulous people also have OCD, but some scrupulous people don't. But they may, for example, feel like, if I don't buy the right kind of bread at the supermarket, it's a sin. And there really are people who feel that way. And that would be an excessive perception of sin. God doesn't really care whether you're buying Wonder Bread or some other kind of bread. And to devote that amount of thought to that question is excessive. But there are people who have that. To an extent, scrupulosity is a normal part of the spiritual maturation process, because there's a balance to be found in the Christian life between having too broad an understanding of what's okay and too narrow an understanding of what's okay. So some people are too broad in thinking, oh, everything I do is fine, I don't have any sins to worry about. And other people have a too narrow a perspective and think, oh man, everything I'm doing is a sin. And part of the process of Christian maturation is figuring out the balance, where you're neither too broad nor too narrow. You're neither a laxist, someone with a lax conscience who doesn't think anything is a sin, or someone who is scrupulous, who thinks everything is a sin. And finding that balance is the goal. But on the way to the goal, most people will pass through some stages where they're lax and other stages where they're scrupulous. So some scrupulosity is just because of spiritual maturation process. It's natural, especially when people are first beginning to take the concept of sin seriously. They tend to overestimate the sinfulness of things. So if you grow up lax and then you have a spiritual awakening, you may zoom to the other extreme and become scrupulous. Some people get stuck there because of obsessive compulsive disorder. So would you have tendencies, either due to either due to your age or the recency of your spiritual awakening or because of something like obsessive compulsive disorder, would you potentially be describable as someone who has scrupulosity?
I would say so, yes. More recently,
Yeah.
I've been baptized. I've done all the steps, but recently, these last 3 years, I've been looking into it a little more further, and prayers have been answered, and just things have been growing. And I found myself to be on both extremes, where I'm too self-critical and the shame hits me, and I hide away, or I'm not sure. I tend to hide away and put myself out if I ever get those thoughts or actions.
Okay, that's not surprising. Like I said, this is something that's very common. It's part of a natural growth process. There is, though, advice that is typically given to people who are going through a scrupulous phase, whether it's a temporary one or a more permanent one due to OCD. And that is, once you've confessed it, do not reconfess it. Because if you reconfess it, then it's going to lead to a cycle where you're reinforcing that behavior, and you're going to end up reconfessing all kinds of stuff, whether it's that sin or some other sin. Fundamentally, confession is not therapy. If you have emotions of guilt that persist, so that you keep feeling guilty even though you've already objectively dealt with the sin by confessing it, you need to seek another kind of help for those emotions that you need to. So that could be a number of things. It could be getting spiritual counseling by talking about it with a counselor, or Christian counselor or spiritual director outside of confession. It could be seeking conventional psychological therapy. It could just be sucking it up, because one of the things we need to do is have faith in what God did for us in confession. He really did absolve us through what the priest did. And we need to have faith in that. We don't want to be saying, oh, well, maybe God didn't really do it, and so I need to reconfess. No, God gave the priest the power. I mean, Jesus told the disciples, whoever sins you forgive, they are forgiven. Whoever sins you retain, they are retained. If you want to look that up, it's at the end of it's in John chapter 20. And so I would suggest, as a first step, meditating on that. And when these feelings come, look at John chapter 20 and read what Jesus says and take it seriously. Have faith in what Jesus said. And then based on that, you can say, well, I went, I confessed, I was absolved, so I should not feel guilty about this anymore. And take whatever emotions of guilt you have and set them aside. This is especially important when one is in scrupulosity. Now, when one is not in a scrupulous phase, there are things that can be learned from feelings of guilt, like, man, I don't want to do that again. But if you find yourself obsessing about these feelings of guilt, you need to set them aside. And the way to do that is not by going to confession again for the same thing, but using extra sacramental or non-confessional ways of dealing with the emotions, because objectively you've already dealt with the sin. God's already forgiven it. You don't need to worry about that sin anymore.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
No problem.
Uriel, thank you. Hey, if you'd like, I'd like to send you a little book that Jimmy wrote called The Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness, and Where to Find It. All you got to do is hang on the line, give us an address, and we'll send it off to you. And off we go now to Steve in Vancouver, Washington, listening on the Modern Day Catholic Radio. Glad to have you, Steve. Go ahead with your question.
Happy to be here. Thank you very much. I had a question about Pope names that you were talking about earlier, and that is, could a Pope take a feminine name, such as Joan of Arc?
Sure. Religious people do that sometimes. You'll have, monks, for example, who are men who nevertheless have a feminine name. Typically, it's paired with a masculine name. So, like they might have a name like, Brother Joseph Mary, but they've got the Mary in there. Similarly, women, religious, nuns and so forth, sometimes take masculine names. So their name might be Sister Peter Maria or something. They've got Peter in there, even though that's a masculine name. It's also, so Pope could do that if he wanted, and he wouldn't have to include his own gender name. I mean, popes can be whatever they want to call themselves. So if he says, I want to just be called Pope Joan, then he would be Pope Joan. Now that would send a very confusing signal to the faithful. So I wouldn't advise a pope to do that because of the problems that would cause. But in terms of could he, well, yeah, he's the vicar of Christ. He can be called whatever he wants. So that's possible. I think another possibility that's more realistic than that is he might use a masculine name, but point out, if he's not using a double masculine feminine name, but he might point out that this masculine name is in honor of a female saint. Like the masculine equivalent of Joan is John. And so he might say, I want to be called Pope John, and I picked my name as an allusion to Joan of Arc and all the great things she did.
Oh, okay, Steve, that makes sense to you?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. I was giving you a chance to talk, but I had you on hold. Sorry about that. Karen's in Louisiana listening on 90.5 FM. Karen, glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here. Thank you. I wanted to find out about astral traveling. How do you protect yourself from attacks from those that are astral traveling to you, to attacking you? How do you protect yourself because it's unseen?
Okay, so you're talking about, now what you're referring to as astral travel, I assume, is what parapsychologists refer to as out-of-body experiences, or OBEs. And so if I want to make sure I understand you correctly, so you're in your body, you're not having an out-of-body experience, but you want to know how to protect yourself from someone who is having an out-of-body experience. Is that correct?
Correct, that are actually attacking you in their out-of-body experience, but you're not.
Okay.
You're there experiencing what was happening.
Okay, well, the first thing I'd want to know is how do I know I'm really being attacked? Even if someone is having an out-of-body experience, and even if they're trying to attack me, that doesn't mean they're going to have much of an effect. There has been research done on can people in an out-of-body experience have caused physical effects in the world? That's what's known as mind over matter or psychokinesis. And the answer is actually yes. For example, the American Society for Psychical Research back in the 1980s did a series of experiments with an out-of-body experiencer named Keith Harari. And they would do things like have Keith go down the hallway and then try to do something psychokinetic, try to have some kind of effect from his mind in the out-of-body experience over matter, like pull on this strain gauge, and that'll show that if we see the strain gauge moves, while you're having the out-of-body experience, that gives us confidence that you're doing it. And they had some positive results with that, but these were very minor effects. I mean, it's like a few grams. And so I don't think there's never been any demonstration that out-of-body experiencers have very much ability to affect things in the physical world. So I would doubt that they could. I'd also want to know how good is the evidence that this is even happening, because we can think we're being attacked when we're not. And people can plant suggestions in our minds. They can say, ooh, I'm going to attack you when I am having an out-of-body experience tonight, when really nothing is happening. Having said that, in terms of how one would defend oneself, well, if you're watching the video version, you may notice I've got a nice St. Michael the Archangel statue behind me that I've had blessed. And I say the St. Michael the Archangel prayer. And I say prayers to God and just say, Father, please protect me. If you want to imagine like a barrier around yourself, to kind of use whatever mental abilities you may have to block anything, you can imagine a barrier around yourself. But I would say trust God. Ask your guardian angel or St. Michael for help. You could get a blessed St. Michael statue if you want, or you could get a St. Michael statue and have it blessed. You can imagine a barrier around yourself. But frankly, I wouldn't worry about it too much, because in the research that's been done on psychic attack, it does not appear that psychic attacks are really able to do that much unless the person who is on the receiving end of the psychic attack believes that it's going to hurt them. So if you just have confidence this isn't going to hurt me, then it's probably not gonna.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Karen?
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Karen, I'd like to send you a copy of Jimmy's book, The Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness and Where to Find It, if you would like it as well. All you have to do is hang on the line. We'll get an address and we'll send it off to you. That music means we have to take a very quick break, but we'll be back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin. I think we're going to have 2 lines open during this little break, so a great time to call. 888-318-7884. Have you ever wondered about the mysterious, even obscure aspects of the Catholic faith? Dive into the Jimmy Akin podcast, where Jimmy brings together information from many fields as he pushes the boundaries of apologetics. Tune in today to the Jimmy Akin podcast, Mysteries of the Faith, a highly entertaining, informative, and at times humorous show that will help you grow in your faith. Visit JimmyAkinPodcast.com today to subscribe.
Lots of people have big questions about Catholicism. It needs a big book of answers, and now it's got one. The Big Book of Catholic Answers is filled with helpful replies to more than 250 questions about the faith. Questions about God, salvation history, the Creed, the Bible, the list goes on and on. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron. A little bit of groovy music there for you. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's Ask Me Anything on Catholic Answers Live. And heading to Texas now. Nathan is in Texas. Nathan, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes, Jimmy and Cy, good to talk to you right now.
Well, we're happy to have you here, Nathan.
All righty. My question is for my wife. She's a new Catholic, went through the RCIA program, and she had a question for me that I could not answer. Here's our question. We know that in the altar there is somebody from the church, that's in the past. Is it a saint? And I do know this is at St. Joseph's, the church that I was recently at, there's not St. Joseph relics. It's actually a pope. And so we're confused. Is it a saint from that saint in the church? Or how does this work when it comes to a relic that's supposed to be in the altar? Thank you.
Okay, so what the Code of Canon Law says is that the custom of placing relics of martyrs or other saints in the altars is to be maintained according to the principles in the liturgical books. So one would want to dig deeper in the liturgical books to find out more particular regulations. But the way I would take that is that it's not required that the parish have a relic of the saint that it's named after. It may, and you could say that'd be a good thing, but it's not required. It's not even required that every altar have a relic. It doesn't say that. It just says this custom is to be maintained. So I would say that they could have a relic from any number of different saints in the altar of a particular church.
You know what, Nathan? I have a feeling, because your wife is a convert and she has a lot of questions and you'd like to be able to answer them, you might like our big book of Catholic answers. It's got 250 of the most common questions, or most profound questions, maybe I should say, about the Catholic faith that people ask. And if all you have to do is hang on the line, if you want it, we'll send you a copy of the big book of Catholic answers. And on we go. Let's go to Jason in Charlottesville, Virginia, listening on the EWTN app. Welcome, Jason. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, thanks for taking me on.
Sure.
And my question is a very simple question, but maybe it's too simple to okay. So why are we Catholic and why do we believe in God in like a conversational answer type way? Like, I know that you can write a whole book about that, but like in just a conversational answer, like how would you respond to that?
Well, so the question is, why do we believe in God and why are we Catholic in a conversational mode?
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Psychelet, that's something that you might have thoughts on. Why do we believe in God and why are we Catholic? What would you say in a conversation about that?
Oh, all right, Jimmy. Thank you. You know what? I might start with a kind of a methodological thing that I learned from Steve Dawson at St. Paul Street Evangelization. And he has a method he calls the one good reason method, which is just if you have a good reason why you believe in God, you could say to the person, well, let me give you one good reason why I believe in God. Or if you have a good reason why you're Catholic, let me give you one good reason why I'm a Catholic. And he likes that, and I like it because it's not intimidating. You know, it's not like I'm now going to give you a 20-part course or something. It's just one good reason. I'm going to share one good reason. And the other thing I like about it is it's my reason. And it's hard to argue with someone else's reason in a mean way. It's more like that opens a conversation. And I think that's what we want to do, Jason. I think we want to open a conversation. So if someone's said to me, why do we believe in God? Why do Catholics believe in God? I might say, a good reason one good reason I have for believing in God is that the world is not chaotic. That it makes sense. It seems planned. It seems organized. I can't imagine that all of that order and beauty is just an accident. And I might talk about why that points to a creator for me. If someone said to me, well, why be Catholic? I might say, one good reason why I'm a Catholic is that in the Catholic sacraments, I keep finding healing. I find that God really helps me in the sacraments, and then I would share some stories about that. How does that strike you, Jason?
Well,
That
you
sounds
might want to
perfect,
ask.
because I think I could overthink it.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yeah. He says it sounds perfect. He might have been overthinking it.
Jimmy?
Similarly, something that I would add is, in terms of why be Catholic, is, well, Jesus founded a church, and the Catholic Church is the organic outgrowth of that original church, and others have split off from it. So if you want to be part of the church Jesus founded, you'd want to be Catholic. And then it would, if they want to probe deeper, you can, but that's the basic answer. Also, anytime someone's looking for advice on how to say something concisely, one of the nice things we have these days is artificial intelligence. And while I haven't used it much, if we've gotten a number of questions today about, well, how could I say this? That's exactly the kind of questions that artificial intelligence can provide helpful suggestions for. So one could go and say, hey, artificial intelligence, give me a brief conversational answer for why believe in God, or give me a brief conversational answer for why be a Catholic. And it'll scan all the literature that's out there that it has access to and try to come up with something that could be helpful.
Jason, thank you very much for the call and for the questions. How about
in fact, we've got Father Justin at Catholic.com. You could ask him those questions.
Oh, yeah, and I'm sure that he would have answers to those. Jason,
because he's scanning all the right Catholic literature for that.
I'm giving away books. I'm in a book giving thing now, and I think maybe a daily defense. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jimmy.
Well, I was going to say Words of Eternal Life because it's focused on here is a short, basic case for believing in God and in Christianity and in the Catholic Church.
Jason, you're getting both. If you hang on and give us an address, we'll send you a daily defense, 365 days plus one to becoming a better apologist, and the Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness and Where to Find It. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the call. The lines continue full. Off to Canada we go. Ray is up in Alberta, Canada, listening on the TuneIn app. We're glad to have you, Ray. Go ahead with your question.
Good. Thank you very much. I was born and raised as a Catholic here in Canada most of the time, and I'm really puzzled and kind of shocked by the fact, if I heard correctly, that Pope Leo XIII, way back in 1901, had a special message to announce the coming of a new century. And I thought that is really illogical, because the century turned and a year before that. And why would a Catholic Church, the hierarchy in the Church, who have a great respect for science and mathematics and so on, make such an illogical error in counting numbers, as simple as going from one century to the next one? And I'm hoping that our new Pope, Leo XIV, being a student of mathematics, maybe he can straighten some of this out a little bit and give the understanding that the turn of the century, for example, the next millennium that we're in now, we're in the second millennium. The millennium actually began after midnight of 1999, as soon as it turned to the year 2000. That would be the beginning of the new millennium, not anywhere else.
All right. Let's let Jimmy check. I think we've got it, but let's let Jimmy give you an answer, and we'll come back to you.
So while I hope Pope Leo XIV, who did get a degree in math, I hope that he has a nice long reign. I don't know that I expect him to be around for the turn of the 22nd century, because that's 75 years away. When it comes, and I think everyone would get tired after 75 years. I suspect even if he lived another 75 years, he would resign before he served out that long of a papal reign. In fact, I suspect if we have popes in the future, if we get really good life improvement technology so that people can live for 300 years, I suspect popes will regularly resign rather than saddle the church with the same point of view for 300 years. But having said that, the actual way the calendar works is that the century really does change when you hit an 01 and not when you see that first new number. So if you think about it, the first year in the Anno Domini system was the year 1, because there was no year 0. 0 was not a thing in European mathematics when Dionysius Exiguus, or Dennis the Short, that was the name of the monk, came up with the AD system. So the very first year in the AD system was the year 1. And if you then, the second year is year 2 and so forth, you get up to 99, and that's the 99th year of the first century, but you need 100 years for a full century. And so the year 100, when you get that third digit and that new number on the front, that year 100 was the 100th year in the Anno Domini system. And so it's the 100th year of the first century. And that means the second century doesn't start till you get to 101. And that pattern replicates through all subsequent centuries. So the last year of each century is when you get the double zeros. that's the 100th year of the new century, and you get a new number at the beginning. But you don't have the next century start until you get 1 year beyond that. And so actually the year 2000 was the last year of the second millennium. And that would even be suggested by its name, 2000. That second for the 2 and the 1000, that's the millennium. So this is the last year of the second millennium. The third millennium then properly began with the year 2001. And so that's how the calendar system works. I know it's counterintuitive that when you see if you've been seeing a bunch of 18s, like 1897, 1898, 1899, and all of a sudden you see a 1900, it's natural for us to think, oh, wow, that looks so different. It's got 2 zeros and it's got a new number on the front, and that makes it seem like it's a new century, but it's really not. It's really the last year of the century in question, the 19th century in that case. Having said that, so there's nothing really here to fix. The current system is working the way it was designed to work. Now, having said that, when the actual year 2000 was approaching, John Paul II decided to celebrate the millennium a year early. And so he had these big buildup of celebrations to the year 2000, which was actually technically a year early. And he did it for exactly the reason I mentioned. It's counterintuitive. When you see the big change, like from 1999 to the year 2000, it's natural for people to think of that as the change of the century, even though it's technically not. And he decided to capitalize on the fact that that's what everyone would naturally think by giving them a big celebration of Jesus when that happened, as opposed to saying, well, technically we're not going to celebrate till 2001. So he decided to pretend that this is when the new millennium began, even though technically it wasn't. So I would say nothing really needs correcting here, and the church has shown flexibility on exactly how we're celebrating stuff in order to help people.
Ray, thank you. That brings us to the break. We'll be right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and his gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Proclaiming the faith, changing lives.
The year was 1987. EWTN programming expands to 24 hours, reaching 10 million subscribers. This was implemented to cover the visit of the Holy Father, something not done by any other network, helping the audience have a direct connection even if they couldn't see him in person.
To learn more about Mother Angelica's life and the history of EWTN, visit EWTN.com/Mother Angelica.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. The number 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin, our guest. It's Ask Me Anything. And I'm going to just keep going now. We got lots of folks on the line, so let me get folks on with Jimmy. Kim is in Colorado. Kim, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, and thanks be to God and the new Pope. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
I have a question regarding coming back to the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know, since I had never been married and I do have children out of wedlock, is it possible that I would, if I do get married later on, is it possible to do anything to be able to get married in the Catholic Church or not?
Well, you haven't ever been married, so all you need to do to get
Right.
married in the Catholic Church is apply to get married. You don't have a bond to any prior spouse that would prevent you from getting married. So you just need to apply to get married in the Catholic Church just like anybody else. The fact you have some children from outside of marriage isn't going to affect that.
Okay, that's good to know. And am I going to go to hell because I accepted the Eucharist at my relative that had passed away funeral, even though I hadn't gone to confession before?
Well, if you knew for a fact that you should not receive and you chose to anyway, then that would be a sin. And it could hypothetically be a mortal sin if you did it with adequate knowledge and deliberate consent. But people at funerals are under lots of pressures, and they have the emotional pressure of grief. They have the pressure of what are other people going to expect of me to do in this occasion. And so that can diminish a person's capacity to give deliberate consent to an act. So it may not have been a mortal sin. Whether it was or wasn't, I would simply say, well, mention it in your next confession. Just go to confession and say, I took communion at this mass, at this funeral mass where I hadn't been to confession in a long time, and just confess it, and you'll be absolved and be free of it, and you don't need to worry about it beyond that.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much.
Well, Kim,
of course, there are no problem. God loves everybody, His church loves everybody, and there are always ways to repair situations.
Kim, I'd like to send you a copy of Jimmy's book, The Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness and Where to Find It. If you'd like it, hang on the phone, give us an address, and we will send it off to you. Thank you very much for the call. Let's go to Ignatius in New York. Ignatius, welcome. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you. So I see a lot of times, a lot of sedevacantists, people who believe there hasn't been a pope since Second Vatican Council, and that every pope from Pope St. John the 23rd to Pope Leo the 14th is a false pope or an anti-pope. They'll often use the words of St. Robert Bellarmine to try and support their arguments, because it seems in St. Robert's defense of the papacy, he describes a scenario where a pope could be a manifest heretic, where he believes a pope could be removed. So I guess my basic question would be, is that what exactly is St. Robert teaching precisely? Is that, how do we respond to sedevacantists on that claim? And do any of St. Robert's words have any theological standing, or is it just like a personal opinion that he comes up with?
This is a personal opinion, and as you can tell if one reads the source work, I'm a big believer not just in looking at individual quotations, but at looking at primary sources in context. And if you read what he actually wrote, and not just selective quotations from it, you see that he names like 6 or so different opinions that Catholics have on this question of what if a pope became a heretic. And so there are multiple different opinions, and this is just one. And there are others that disagree, that say, well, no, the pope wouldn't cease to be pope if he became a heretic. So this is not church teaching. This is theological opinion, and there are contrary theological opinions. Also, I would so that's first point. Second point, canon law does not, which is the actual rules governing the church, does not incorporate this theological opinion. Once someone is a pope, the only way for them to lose that office is for them to either die or resign. There is nothing in canon law about if a pope becomes a heretic, he loses his office. There's a different set of procedures that govern what happens if someone becomes a heretic. And there are 2 kinds of responses. Now, a pope who became a heretic would and fulfilling all the qualifications of heretic. There are a bunch. But if he did fulfill all the qualifications of heretic, then he would be excommunicated, but it would be what's known as a latae sententiae excommunication. And here's the thing about latae sententiae excommunications is even if you are excommunicated latae sententiae, you don't lose your office. You're not supposed to use it, but you don't lose it, and you can still validly exercise your office. It's only if the excommunication is ferende sententiae, or declared by a competent ecclesiastical authority who's able to make this declaration, that you lose the office. And since, as canon law also provides, the Holy See is judged by no one, that means only the Pope could declare himself excommunicated. So even if a Pope were a heretic, the way canon law handles this, he wouldn't lose the office of the papacy unless he declared himself excommunicate. Then there's a third point, which is the most fundamental one. None of the popes from Vatican II onward have actually committed heresy. Heresy is a very specific ecclesiastical crime. It has a bunch of different things that have to happen for a person to be a heretic the way the church understands it. And none of the popes have even been in the ballpark of being a heretic. What happens with these sedevacantists is they look at recent church teaching or practice and say, oh, that's a heresy, when in fact it's not. They have a poor understanding of what counts as a heresy, and they have a poor understanding of the authority level of prior statements and practices, and they misapply them in these situations. And for people who aren't careful in how, and knowledgeable in how they read church documents, they can sound convincing, because you can make any case sound convincing if you rip quotations out of context and you use terms in different ways than they were used at the time. So one of the things that's important in this area is getting a sense of how to read ecclesiastical documents and interpret them and figure out their levels of authority. And I wrote a whole book on that. It's called Teaching with Authority. And since Ignatius is in New York, which used to be New Amsterdam, but is still, as far as I know, part of the United States, let's see if we can send Ignatius a copy of Teaching with Authority.
Hang on, Ignatius. We'd love to send it to you. Let me see if I can get one more caller in here. Brock in Texas, you are going to have to be quick if you would like an answer from Jimmy.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, Brock.
All right. Yeah, it'll be quick. So me and my fiance are engaged. I'm wondering if we can get civilly married prior to being sacramentally married.
Are either one of you Catholic?
We're both Catholic.
Okay. The answer
right now.
Okay. The answer in the United States is no. Some countries require people to get married civilly, separately from having a Catholic wedding, because they don't recognize weddings done by Catholic ministers. Germany, if I recall correctly, is a country like that. But here in the United States, the government does recognize Catholic marriages. And so the thing for Catholics to do is get married in the Catholic Church. If you were to just go down to the courthouse or something, or go to a non-Catholic minister and get married without permission from your bishop, that would not be a valid union, and you would not be able to morally lead a married life at that point. You need to, unless some very extraordinary circumstances apply, you need to do the normal thing, which is for Catholics to get married in the Catholic Church. And not live as husband and wife before that.
Brock, I appreciate you got that question out quick enough to allow Jimmy an opportunity to get you an answer.
And I could make it sound better if I had more time, but given the brevity of time we have, I wanted to give a clear answer, even if I'd like to position it a little more gently in some ways.
I got you. Brock, thank you. Thanks to everybody who called. We gave away a lot of books today, so I will leave this room and walk past the customer service room, and maybe they'll yell at me about giving away so many books. I don't know. We're about to find out. Jimmy Akin has been our guest. Check out his podcast, The Jimmy Akin Podcast, and Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. The latter of those two, one of the most popular documentary podcasts anywhere. You can get them both wherever you get your podcasts, or check out Jimmy's YouTube channel. Jimmy Akin, it's always fun. Thanks for 2 great hours.
Thank you, Cy Kellett.
That will do it for us. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.